Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Legacy Lee, he, him, his. I'm the director of the Intercultural Center. And welcome to our first and only fact chat of the fall semester, brought to you by the Intercultural Center and the SMC Library. Since 2018, fact chats have been a forum for faculty, students, and staff to come together outside of the classroom and engage with inspiring faculty research on different aspects of social justice. And we're so glad you could join us today. As always, for our fact chats, we'll have 30 minutes for the conversation, followed by time for questions from the audience, usually about 15 minutes or so. This will be an interactive session, and we hope that you'll remain engaged and be prepared to move around a bit today or engage with our speaker as you see fit. Also, feel free to eat and drink during the presentation. We have some light appetizers. Once again, we thank you for joining us, and to introduce today's guest presenter, I'll pass it over to Bianca Rubio Garcia. Her, a second-year English major with a French minor who works as the graphic designer here at the Intercultural Center. Please welcome Bianca.
Hello all. Dr. Johnson is a Bay Area native, born in Oakland, California. He attended school at El Sobrante Christian and later graduated from Salesian High School in 2001 as a scholar athlete. He moved to Long Beach, California in 2001 to attend CSU Long Beach, where he took up acting, photography, eventually graduating with a BS in criminal justice and high-tech crime. In 2007, he came back to CSU Long Beach for his master's in educational technology and media leadership. Looking at his contributions to St. Mary's College, Dr. Johnson brings over 20 years of experience in educational technology and media leadership. He currently serves as the Senior Diversity Officer and Director of Educational Technology for St. Mary's College of California. He holds a doctorate from Southern Illinois University in Mass Communications and Media Arts with an emphasis on human-computer interaction. Dr. Johnson has maintained a deep passion on topics exploring the intersection of race, class, gender, and technology. Outside of work, James loves to spend time with his family, especially with his 3-year-old son, Zaire. He's an avid gamer. Call of Duty Warzone and God of War are his go-tos. Another hobby of James's is cooking. He loves to barbecue and is always looking for a reason to make his mother's banana pudding from scratch. Fun fact, he once spent a month in Tanzania building a library in an eco-village, hanging out with the Maasai tribe, where he camped in the Serengeti Ngorongoro crater, hosted by exiled Black Panthers in the mountains of Ashura. And he was also a guest in the home of their very first Lady of Tanzania. Today's conversation is related to finding love in mediated spaces. Dr. Johnson will cover conventional conversations around love and courtship while adding other cultural contexts to account for the lived experiences of traditionally marginalized groups, utilizing various strategies to find love in spaces that often did not, or do not, consider their experiences around seeking love. His talk today is entitled Technology, Race, and Dating, Traditionally Marginalized Perspectives Around Online Courtship. So please join me in welcoming Dr. James Johnson.
Thank you. Who is that person? So we're going to get started. If you have a smartphone, we have menti.com. I think I said that right, menti.com, and there's a code 29662447. We're going to ask a few questions throughout the presentation. Also, I'm open to questions as we go. We don't have to wait to the end. There's also a feature on the slide. If you want to ask questions on a particular slide, we can do that, or just raise your hand. We can also act like we're in the same room. So, all right, so I see people are, so love, content, tired. I'm with you on that one. Great. Too much coffee, I wish. Full, in the zone. All right. So it looks like we're getting the hang of this. You guys done this before? Productive. All right. So it looks like we're there. So menti.com. So for the next one, all right. Why this topic? Long story less long. I was in grad school and I had done some work in DC following Obama and like the social media trend. Came time to actually do my own research, but everybody was doing politics and social networking. And it was just like, okay, well, whenever you're doing a dissertation topic, they're always asking you, so what? Why do you want to study this? And why should the public care, right? Well, since everybody was doing politics and social media, I was just one more person doing that. And so then my professor was saying, hey, don't you do this thing called online dating? A little embarrassed. Like, how does my professor know my business, right? But I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I'm glad I did. Long story short here is that I started doing this research. It was also weird because I was still actively online dating and also a researcher in online dating. Needless to say, IRB got very confusing. That being said, it just unveiled a whole new realm of research for me, and I realized it was novel. Not too many people were doing research on online dating. More specifically, people weren't doing online dating in race. So around that time, we had a study that came out from OkCupid. OkCupid did a study from 2009, 2014. It said that these few groups are the least attractive group according to interactive data. Interactive data at that time was that they were tracking the messaging, checking the DMs, you know, and seeing who actually messaged back to different races. And one big key thing there was African American women were least likely to be responded back to, right? But let me ask you guys a question. If you're looking at 2009 and you're looking at 2014, actually, let me give you a little bit more context. In this OK trend, the reason why this trend was so big was because on the actual online dating profile, people said, oh, yes, I'm open to date interracially. However, their interactive data showed that that was not true, right? So why do we have the social pressure to present as interracially tolerant in 2009, but then as we progress to 2014, we see that the interactive data actually shows something counter. What happened between 2009 and 2014? Si se puede, si se puede, hope, right? So 2009, we have Obama. So it was cool to like, yo, hope and change. Yes, we can, right? Everybody was all about, you know, racial tolerance when Obama was coming in. But as we go from 2009 to 2014, we're getting closer and closer to, we won't say his name. So here, I just want to check the room. How many of you have ever used online dating? Okay. Oh, I see some shy people crossing back over to the yeses. So, okay, you know, it's anonymous. Okay. I'm gonna keep. All right. So, okay, so the room has had some experience with online dating, right? So it's not as taboo. It's not as, you know, some of the issues that I was dealing with some of my participants in my study, you know, I don't need to do online dating. You know, I can meet people in person. So let's take a look. You are not alone. Online dating started back during the printing press, you know, through personal ads in the newspaper. So this ad right here, back in 1898, which is like, I don't know, it's 34 years post-slavery. So we're looking at wealthy, got to put that first, right? Well, why did people get married back in the day in the first place? It's a business contract, right? We're trying to keep the land in the family. You know, he has a good name. His dad's a politician. I mean, come on, y'all. What's the British Netflix Bridgerton, right? Right? It's all about that, right? So wealthy, lost mother, for whom I sacrificed my youth, dread a lonely future, seek husband and true companion. What you'll find from the time this first started all the way to now, once you got past a certain age, you look desperate. Not judging anybody in here, all right? So here's another one. An old bachelor returning from the mines finds his old sweetheart married and old acquaintances scattered, desires lady acquaintance. Object, marriage, right? So this is just the conventional way. This is how like everyday people, how dominant culture experience love through personal ads. So I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm always asking like, well, what about the Black perspective? What about the traditionally marginalized perspective? Along this time, we have the free Black press, right? So if the newspaper is one way to communicate how to love, how to find love, and how to communicate culture, the Black press was that for African Americans who were freed. Now, Black press actually starts to fade out because of literacy levels, finances, and doesn't have the same resources as dominant culture, right? However, debutantes, celebrations, and things like that, they were also flowing within newspapers. So newspaper at that time is really key on trying to find love. What's also not said here is that if we were to fast forward, so without jumping back and forth, so we're talking about 1898 on the last slide. This is still kind of 1898 here, even earlier, 1827. Let's start moving more towards, let's say, the 1900s. What's going on in the 1900s? Industrial Revolution. Well, what happens when there's an industrial revolution? Right now we're in a data revolution, right? Are y'all still booked and busy? Y'all going to brunch? What's going on? Busy, right? Everybody's working 2 and 3 jobs, studying, stacking classes. How do you maintain, right? So during the Industrial Revolution, we start seeing an uptick in the personal ads. Why? Because people are off to war. People are also taking on jobs, new jobs. But on top of people going off to war, there are also columns called Lonely Heart columns that people were hired to write to the soldiers at war, right? How do you keep morale up if all the men are at war? So there's all types of services going on right now to keep the morale up at war, as well as the Lonely Heart columns where people are trying to find love. So I have this book, escaping the name from me right now, but it's like 19th century Lonely Hearts by a British guy. And he tells a story about how not only was it the Industrial Revolution that gives us an uptick in the Lonely Hearts, but at that time, having a same-sex desire for a partner was illegal. So there were coded ways to communicate within that community in plain sight. But that was a way for them to communicate and build community in the Lonely Hearts ad. All right. Now this is in 1827, but let's fast forward. So late 90s, early 2000s, we have the computers, we have internet. Well, on top of the internet, we start getting not leaderboards, but like chat rooms. We go from chat rooms to social media as we know it now, but back then it was a little bit more basic. So people are just, hey, I like you. How do you know you like me? Well, we're going to chat and send pictures. So we had chat rooms. Then social media with Web 2.0, we start getting a little bit more sophisticated. And social media, so we start adopting aspects from traditional social media sites into online dating sites. So remember Facebook, I'm poking you, the very useless tool of poking people. Now it's like a technological flirt in an online dating site. So you take that feature out of one site, put it in another site, and it's a way to flirt with people. So here is one of my friends who is kind enough to Let me use her profile. So we saw wealthy before, right? Here, fast forward, this was taken 2016. Jane, her name is not Jane, but Jane of most trades, mistress of all, soul swipe rookie. I love to travel. I keep it simple, like Daria, right? So we're starting to see a shift in how we even present. But what's also important is how a person of color presents versus how a white person would present, or a Latin person would present. So now we're getting more into the sophistication of self-disclosure strategies. How do I share pieces of myself safely, right? That gets us into Erving Goffman. Erving Goffman is a theorist. So not to bore you too much, I'm trying to keep it light. Erving Goffman, he came up with a dramaturgy theory saying that our identities are situated within a situation. Right now, my identity went from DEI person down the hall to speaker right now. The situation determines my identity. So my backstage, everything is a performance. Your interaction is a performance. This is what this is about. This was Erving Goffman's dramaturgy. So in dating, you're expediting a lot of the, hey, you're cool, what do you like to do? No, you're going right into it. The situation now has been expedited into a dating situation. So you don't have to go to a bar or the pub or meeting somebody in the library and have all like the roundabout conversations. It gets straight to it. And that's where the way we self-disclose in this environment is very important, because it's situated within this technological space that determines our identity. Does that make sense? Clear as mud? All right. Now, again, so the participants that I was studying were African American women between the ages of early 30s to early 40s. All right, raise your hand if you're familiar with some of these images. All right, okay. Bell Hooks calls these images controlling images. Because no matter how you self-disclose, no matter how you present yourself, these images chip away at how you present. Now, these controlling images in particular speak to African American women. So we have Hattie McDaniel from Gone with the Wind. She plays the mammy character. So if you are a heavy-set African American woman, you are constantly fighting against this stereotype of a cantankerous or angry, asexual, no sexual agency, heavy-set woman. And so we see, was it Gabrielle Sibidet? Hopefully I said her name right. And so there's a lot of stuff in the media. Now I would probably swap her out with maybe a Lizzo, right? If I were to update this, I would put Lizzo there, because Lizzo has a lot to do with her body image and constantly combating that controlling image. Venus Hottentot. So Venus Hottentot, Sarah Bartman, she was an African who was taken, enslaved, and for a circus. And because the men there, the Dutch men, have never seen buttocks that size before. And they labeled her Venus Hottentot, put her in a carnival, and pretty much just put her on display. Well, fast forward, look at your Instagram, right? BBLs and everything else. So if you are an African American woman trying to find love online, how are these controlling images pushing against the images that you're putting on your online dating site? What are some of those problems that you're being confronted with, trying to come off a certain way? However, this media landscape is polluting how people see you. Again, I would update this, but I don't think I need to. So Belle is, it was all about the tragic mulatto. So each one of these archetypes you guys can find. There's a really good website called the Jim Crow Museum. And so it's an online museum of these type of archetypes. So we have the mammy character, we have the Venus Hottentot, and now we're at the tragic mulatto. Tragic mulatto is the half black, half white female who never finds peace in her own community, but is never fully accepted in the white community as well. So Meghan Markle, for the last few years, we've seen that, right? Being fully accepted into the royal family. So again, just because you're light-skinned doesn't necessarily mean you have a better time. It just means that your time is a little different, and your controlling images are slightly different compared to, say, someone who's dark-skinned, heavy-set. Last but not least, we have the sapphire. The sapphire character is typically angry black woman, right? When Michelle Obama and when the Obamas were in the White House, how often did Michelle Obama have to fight against being an angry black woman, right? So it's like, James, okay, well now you went this whole nother direction. How does this have to do with online dating? Again, if you are trying to advertise your best self, you're trying to self-disclose pieces of yourself, yet people are coming to this online platform because online platforms are also a part of the overall media landscape. So Melissa Harris Perry, who we had just a few years ago, from her book I use for my study as well, she calls this the crooked room theory. If all of media is depicting a group as such with controlling images, well, the media landscape turns into a crooked room. Why is it a crooked room? Because if you step into a crooked room, you don't know if you're the problem or if the room is the problem, right? So this is the same thing with media portrayals of African American women. So the media landscape, so the overall argument here is that online dating can also participate in the crooked room of having African American women meet unrealistic expectations, especially when men are being super disrespectful in the messages. All right. Just to update it. So back then, you know, it was like more Match.com, OkCupid, Swipe. What are you and your peers using to meet online? Can you slide in the DMs on TikTok? Is that possible? Don't choke. Don't choke. Tinder, Hinge, Instagram. Okay. So Tinder is more of a hookup app. No, it has a bad rep of being a hookup app, but I know a lot of people use Tinder. And then did you guys know the founders of Tinder and Bumble used to date? Yeah. And now they signed NDAs and they can't talk to each other. And then Bumble also started on college campuses. That's how it bubbled up. And so Marco Polo's still around. Okay. And Instagram. So what's really interesting too is that, so another theorist called Andrea, her name was Andrea Boyd. She graduated from Berkeley. She compared social media sites to real estate, right? Why would we compare social media sites to real estate?
The market's vast. You can have a cottage or you can have a mansion.
Close.
You have access to
Close.
those, or you can view, at least view.
Okay.
all of that real estate.
I like where you're going.
I mean, you're selling yourself. So, and what I mean by that, so like if you have a Tinder profile, you don't want to disclose all the ugly parts of yourself. You want to show all the nice parts. So like with real estate, you're not going to show a house that looks crooked. You're going to try to make sure it looks nice and talk about all the nice things of that house or that real estate.
Ooh, you guys are really close.
Certain neighborhoods have certain facets, you know, oh, this neighborhood's in the city, this is the suburbs. Different type of people live in different type of places.
Yeah, so Andrea Boyd, what she said so for those of us who had Facebook, we had Facebook very early. Facebook was found by the Ivies in the Ivy League. And so when Facebook came along, a lot of us were on MySpace. You actually had to have an Ivy League email to get on to Facebook. But MySpace became, you know, I'm mad at you because you're not in my top 8 and all this other stuff, right? Well, what ends up happening is that we start seeing, once Facebook started opening up to other colleges, there was a white flight, which is a real estate term about when people of color move into a neighborhood, white people tend to move out to, you know, for the white flight to preserve the value of their home. So they sell their homes early and go to a whole nother neighborhood. So we saw a white flight from from MySpace to Facebook. MySpace was looked at as ghetto. Facebook was looked at as, this is the place to be. I know some of you in here are like, Facebook. No, it's Instagram and TikTok now. So it's actually changing. So let's take a look now. You guys are applying economics to the love market, right? So a profile picture, that's an advertisement, right? The market itself, it was like, what's your currency? You know, are you attractive? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder? But there's just things that you come with. There's assets you come with, whether that's money, clothes, style, whatever assets you come to the love market with, right? But again, from neighborhood to neighborhood, the platforms are looked at as neighborhoods and how they're invested in. And how does gentrification happen on actual technological platforms? So all of these are not created equal. So I can tell you from experience, as well as talking to participants in my study, Black people meet is what? It's the hood. It's the hood, sorry. Match.com, Bumble, Tinder, those are more upscale because that's where the money is going into. You get more features. They also bleed you to death with all the other little freemium features. But so you start getting a different user experience depending on the different platforms that you're on. And so this is where we're trying to shift now in the research. So before I gave you, historically, platforms was the newspapers. Now we got to online dating. Now we're getting a little bit more into the user experience. Why is it important? Again, crooked room. All of these different sites are a part of this crooked room. And all of these different sites are owned by the same 3 or 4 people. So Match.com, I forgot exactly who they own, but they owned like Match.com, OkCupid, my participants called it plenty of foolishness, not plenty of fish. I think eHarmony is by itself. Yeah, and I met my fiance on Coffee Meets Bagel. So, yeah. All right. Again, so thinking of controlling images. This is a real comment from one of the participants. It could be a Coke bottle shape or a pear shape, but I think curvy just helps to create a better visual of my body shape as opposed to just saying a few extra pounds. Again, right? Remember the controlling images? We had the Venus Hottentot versus the Mammy character, right? So just changing the language in the advertisement, people are actively thinking about that, right? Because I'm finding that my average is not necessarily the next woman's average because we're all built a little differently. Comment. However, curvy can range in size from very skinny, and she laughs, very large. So then again, it can be a double-edged sword. But I prefer that the little extra pounds were average. So people are trying to stay away from certain language in their profiles. All right. Take out your cellular devices. Do gender roles still apply in today's dating market? Dun, dun, dun. I'm about to start some stuff on this one. Yes and no. Of course. Somewhat. Yes, 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 yes. Does anyone brave enough to discuss? Of course. Anyone? Sure.
Typically, male identifying people are expected to send the first message.
Okay. Okay.
Who pays for the date if we were to go on the date?
That's still a thing?
Like,
Yes.
everybody, it's a thing that males are supposed to be the one who pay for the date, but like people have been arguing about that.
Okay, they still argue about that.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Is that for the younger group? Because I think maybe the older group, we kind of go Dutch, we like,
Yes.
because most women like older, like I can do my own, I mean, I can pay for mine, you can, I'll pay for this one, you get the next one, or?
I think it is a generational thing. Because the reason why I put this in here, as Broke James, the researcher, who was doing research, had to pay. So I'm joking, but as both the researcher and then those who weren't a part of the research, I was still online dating, right? I found this very interesting. As a graduate student, and you are a professional making six figures, I actually still had to pay for the dates, which factored into whether we continued or not, because I'm like, oh, my little stipend, you know. So we got to figure out if yay or nay real quick, right? So I think it's really interesting because the next thing here, a lot of the women in my study were professional black women. What they were telling me was that, yeah, I started out, you got to pay. You ask me out, whether I ask you out, you ask me out, you have to pay. But what I started finding was that they later released that idea because sometimes a good candidate doesn't necessarily always have the means to treat you for X number of dates, especially in today's economy, right? In the Bay Area, right? And so we're starting to get to generation. Now, if he can't take you to Louis, I don't know.
Can he come up to my stats? Can he come up to my stats?
Yeah, and so one of my participants were saying he has to meet me or beat me, right? And here's the thing, I'm not here to say lower your standards. I'm just telling you what the other women said. I mean, I'm good, all right? So I want you to pay attention to the picture before you read the excerpt. For African American women in this study, they said being a black woman is like jumping double dutch. It's being black as well as being a woman. I'm constantly trying to figure out which one shows up first or which one gets dinged first. So when reading this, they say the men that I've spoken to, they tell me that it's harder to get in with a black woman than it is to get in with any other woman. So they go where the less work is, I guess. It's easier to, jump rope than it is to double dutch. It might be a lived experience. I understand that there's a little bit of problematic piece in there. However, there is an intersectional experience in that, right? There's an intersectional experience in that where, again, you don't know from a male perspective, approaching a woman, you don't know what intersectional trauma she has coming into this online dating process, right? You don't know why she's making you pay for that meal, right? I paid for these other meals and he just ran off and he was doing all these other things. Like, prove to me, invest in me, The reason why I led with the gender comment too is that, fellas, women tend to have better credit than us. They tend to be a little bit more accomplished than us. They tend to get the ball rolling sooner from a financial, from a professional standpoint. And so what does that mean from a gender role? What does that mean if you're trying to build? So this is just more to problematize. Again, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I see your face. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to put stuff out there for you to think about. What does it mean in today's economic climate if one person makes more and it doesn't necessarily meshes with traditional gender roles? How do you weigh that this person is truly investing in you and not taking advantage of you? These are real conversations, right? So, something to think about. And then these are just some healthier images, because I know I just hit you guys with a bunch of controlling images and very shocking. And so this is one of my favorite shows. Unfortunately, it ended out of a toxic situation, but Love Is, Insecure, and then there's Black Love. And that's it. Any questions? Any general questions? Thank you. Any questions about online dating? And yeah.
I'll start you off with the question. I was actually on OkCupid during the 2 years, during that period of time you were talking about when they did that survey.
Yep.
I remember reading it and being really shocked. I mean, not shocked because I have a Master's of American Studies, so
Yeah.
but shocked in the sense that it was happening to people I know, right, like at that time. So one of the things I was wondering about in this is if you have any research or you got some comments from people about their experience with people's expectations with dating people of color, right? So when I was online, I would realize that many people might be open to dating someone of color, but they actually hadn't had that experience before. So I would go on dates, and yet I realized much quicker than they would that you don't actually know what it's like to date a black man. Like you actually are not going to understand. There's so many things they would say or comments they would say or things where I would realize, oh, we're not going to vibe already. I can just tell this because for you this is like this novel, almost like tokenizing experience, right?
Yep.
I'm just trying to connect with an individual person, and I'm biracial too. So so if I was dating like a white woman, my mother's white, I've been around, but some of these people didn't even have black friends, right? And so I just wonder if you had any of that experience. I found that pretty shocking in my dating experience of people kind of crossing that line in almost a fetishizing, tokenizing way. I don't know.
Fetishizing was definitely real on both ends. So just a little insight. So I did my research while I was in Illinois in the Midwest, small town. Some people call it the armpit of America, but it was a small town. And because I was living on so many different sites and I would take these hiatuses off of from like dating, I got to know people. Like when you watch these Alfred Hitchcock Rear Window, I started watching these profiles evolve over time. I could start remembering profiles. I'm like, oh, you didn't say that back in 2016. And then when I moved back to the Bay Area, I started watching individuals from, sorry, it sounds creepy, but as a scholar, I was like, I know these people. Like I started recognizing people from their online dating profiles. And I would say, hey, you know that person? They're like hiking, they're really into hiking, or this part. And so, to your point, as far as the fetishizing, what I noticed was that things change as far as what they're willing to date. And that could have been like, okay, I've either checked that off. Some of my participants, they said that, they tried it, but people couldn't double dutch. People didn't understand the double dutch aspect of their identity. Being a black woman, being a professional black woman, what that entails. Me dating in the Midwest was a little different than the Bay Area, right? No matter what race it was just very different. And so the fetishizing also, and just hearing other guys like, they would be on Tinder, but they would be on Tinder because it's like shooting fish in a barrel and they're just trying to go through, they're trying to just, do their thing. And then I had my gay friends, they were telling me like, well, where are we? I said, well, man, I can't spend my whole life doing this research for my dissertation, but they start telling me about life on Grindr and all these other things and how fetishism is really big in that community, right? And that's how I started learning about bears and otters and everything else. So it was very interesting when you start looking at how race complicates attraction, how race complicates building in partnership with someone, and if they even understand that. So yeah, so I came across it, but it came out in so many different ways.
I noticed you didn't have, I think it's called Twoctify. You didn't have that one up there. How do you feel about that one?
Which one?
Twoctify?
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. Talkify. I haven't heard that one. So they pop up and leave and melt. They get bought out by different ones, but no, I haven't had Talkify. I think around the time I did this research, there was Our Time and some other ones. But the pandemic, what I realized during the pandemic, they absorbed some other features like FaceTime, right? And so you can start speed dating through video, and so it's very interesting to watch them evolve over time. So, but yeah, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, that one, I think it's really expensive to join. You have to.
Do you have like a idea of how people can fight like their implicit bias when it comes to like either interracial dating or just interracial dating?
So the implicit bias, are we talking online or offline? Are you talking about bypassing it online, or are you talking about you're out on a date and people are?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Ooh, girl, if I found that out. I think it takes a level of grit. I think there's nothing more revolutionary than loving who you want to love. And I think you have to step into that. So from online, if you're pursuing a particular person and they are of a different hue, it's all good. If you are out in public, it's all good. You have, I think, some of the most issues that I've had, you know, because I'm in an interracial relationship, and even in doing this research, there were some issues. Even some of my participants was like, "Wait, what?" You know, so I think you have to be secure on who you love, and it's not a platinum standard like advice that I can give you, but once you are comfortable with who you are and what you're doing, it's nobody else's business. So the implicit bias, it's going to be there, but you can't let anybody else mess with your own happiness. That's all. That's what I can say. Because I don't think you can. Long story short, you can't. That's their problem, and it's going to keep happening. So you just prepare yourself to sit in it and be okay with that.
I know we already kind of touched on the ideas of generational differences and like thanks for the day and et cetera, but especially with kind of the advent and like everyone has a phone in their hand. 2-year-olds are on their iPads, like iPad kids, the idea of technology being at our fingertips more than it has than any other time. How that affects the idea of like online dating, and also the idea of if you're not with someone, you're incomplete, you're not whole. The idea of person, oh, are you dating someone yet? Are you dating someone yet? Like, how is that kind of brought up with this like newer generation?
This newer generation, I don't know. I think that's going to be someone else's research on the newer generation, because when I did this, I think I was more focused, more my generation a little bit, people who came up with the internet, but is just slightly ahead of the TikToks and YouTube personalities and things like that, right? I think your question is interesting because of where we are, like on campus, because even with my participants, there was a thing between churched and unchurched. So how you were raised, that's going to play into it. How you find yourself in college, that's going to play into it. You know, and I think there's just factors there for another researcher to take a look at, especially if you really want to focus on the difference between church and unchurched. Because I was, well, I don't know if I was until my mom, let me see. Raised Baptist, was in a Christian school, graduated from Catholic school, got to Long Beach State, lost my mind. So you always have those morals and values to fall back on. It's just that for this next generation, I don't know what that looks like, whether they've been raised in this type of institution or not. And I think that's just another study for another day. So I appreciate your question. I just don't know if I can answer fully. Any other questions?
I just had a
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Oh, I think I've read a lot about this kind of stuff, and I also wonder in your research how much the idea of whiteness being a default comes up, you know, because a lot of those combative images are constructed with the idea that whiteness is the ideal and is the beacon that we all should be aspiring to. And especially if you are a darker skinned black woman, you're considered to always be at the bottom of the totem pole.
Right.
So it could be a thing where maybe it is other people's problem, but if it's always affecting this demographic, then what collectively needs to be done so that there's awareness that it's not black women's fault for existing as they do, or even a problem, but that there's systemically, consciously, we are all skewed.
Yeah, I 100% correct. I think that we live in a capitalist society, and people know better. People know what they're doing. I think it's the money. And so Match.com, when I was doing the research, I downloaded all their commercials, because your commercials are the gateway to the audience that are coming onto the platform. So when I first started, they didn't have a lot of diversity in their platform. So next thing you know, you pay your $120 for the year as a black person, and you say, you know, I'm willing to date interracially, but you gotta give me some other things to work with as well. And you just find out like you're just getting cycled through. And there were some actual things that were happening with black people of color's profiles were not being taken down right away, so it can appear more diverse. So you would have canceled and deactivated your profile, but it was still circulating just so that diverse feel can still happen. So again, it's not until you get, if you say collectively, we have to get involved on the commercials. We have to get involved at, you know, some type of audit from the behind the scenes as well. So, I mean, because we're also seeing that with Twitter right now, right? So it being sold, and Elon said, you know, they didn't have certain records and reports on this. And so there has to be some type, I think there needs to be some type of regulation on it. So some type of transparency of the demographic. So if I'm paying $100 and some for the year and you're guaranteeing me a certain amount of profiles, is that true? Yeah. And then even so what we didn't get into was homophily. There's this term called homophily, racial homophily, educational homophily. Homophily means that you are into the same group that you're a part of. So I have a PhD, I want somebody else with a PhD. I make X amount of dollars, this person has to make X amount of dollars. And so in that 2009, 2014 study, it showed that women of various races have higher levels of homophily, racial homophily, than the men in general. And then so I think there's a lot there, but if you're looking at it holistically, I think you hit them where the money is, and they'll start changing advertisements, they'll start changing features, they'll start cleaning up profiles, they'll start attracting a certain type of person. So I think it's the money until that happens. So.
Time for one more question if someone has a question.
Right behind you.
So I wanted to bring this up. So I've always stayed within my culture, but this time I decided I went interracial and I dated someone for a little bit, or we went out a couple of times. And I noticed everywhere we went, so when we went somewhere shopping, you know, pretty much they gave him the bags. So when we went to get something to eat, pretty much they gave him the bill. And I think that was like, I'm thinking it was because the guy was white, so they gave everything directed to him. Pretty much the questions were directed to him. It was almost as if I was invisible standing there. I'm like, I have my own stuff to pay for, we're just on a date. But everything was geared towards him.
That's common. And that's the double Dutch. It's like, is it a racial thing or is it the gender thing? You know? How does he present? Is he speaking over at the table and like really engaging it? Like how much do our identities play into the situation? And then it's also kind of like the implicit bias as far as, you know, how does this person receive me and my partner at the time? So there's a lot of things at play. But I think that's common. And I think that goes back to the gender question, who pays and who does this. I mean, I've been in similar situations with a white partner years ago, and she deliberately did not reach for the bill because she said, I don't want to do that to you in public. You know what I mean? Because assuming that she'll pay for, like, she's paying the bill, like, what does that look like for me as a black man? You know, so she had that. So there's just a lot at play, especially like nowadays, you know? So I wish I could tell you that that's not common, but I would assume that that's pretty common.